Okay, hey guys, I just wanted to show off a material I've been working on in Unreal Engine 4 that allows me to vertex paint between 3 different materials using height interpolation, where a height map helps determine where it starts painting and when. A video about this sort of process has been shared a few times, and I just kind of want to show how to blend between 3 different materials on this kind of thing, doing 3 completely separate materials, not just one that's like a discoloration of another one. So what I wanted for this scene was to have a floor texture, which is still not necessarily final, and I'm going to turn off the grid for now. It's still not necessarily final. I like it, but I don't necessarily love it. It does have some pretty cool effects on it, but and I need a gravelly material to help in the areas where rubble are, and I was thinking of putting in a few puddles as the area above it is destroyed, so that some water could get in and kind of just sit. Could even set up the scene for raining. I don't know. No final decisions yet, but at least gives me a setup for a 3rd material, and I can always change it later if I need to. So here's where I'm at right now. These floor tiles are little individual tiles, and as you can see, they're pretty dense in terms of vertices. Sometimes I'm kind of slow on this kind of thing just because I'm pretty new to the Unreal Engine. But you can see, well, no, you cannot see the resolution of the geometry. Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. You can sort of see the vertices coming through there. There's a decent amount there, and I went with floor tiles. I was getting a shadow issue between my tiles before. I think it was because I was using blocks instead of planes, but I kept having an issue with planes where they wouldn't have collisions. So instead I just put a terrain under the whole thing and decided to stop worrying about it and then use the planes for the ground. This little pedestal thing is going to be rebuilt, so I wouldn't worry about it too much right now. I'm really just trying to focus on getting these textures done. But the thing I'm going for here is the ability to paint between the standard tile texture on these vertices, this water material that I've brought in, or that I've made. I made it. And this sandy gravelly material, which just has like little rocks and stuff in it, and is similar to the texture being used at the edges of my little rubble pieces. So that way I can kind of get in there and have little bits of the sand and rubble to help make the, don't worry about that, to make the rubble feel a little more like it's involved in the environment. But I can paint between these at will. I can jump between them. I just have to keep changing this material. They can override each other. And the water material, you can also see that other material kind of coming through it a little bit, but it doesn't have that same definition. It's kind of flat or flatter under it, and that is very purposeful. And I'll show you how I did that. But but this is what I'm going for. I can dry up and paint puddles wherever I want with very minimal impact on how my scene runs, because vertex painting is honestly the coolest thing I have ever seen in my entire life. So here it is. There it is. So let's look at the actual material, and it hurts to look at a little bit, but it works. So that's all I really care about. You see I've got plugins for base color, metallic. Nothing in here has metallic properties. I almost wonder why I do it at all. Roughness, normal, and ambient occlusion. Nothing else. I'm thinking of playing around with a few other things, but for the most part, it's pretty much good to go. So let's see the rest of it. So I'm still learning how to organize materials, and it gets real spiderwebby in here, and I'm sorry. But I'm working on it. But the toughest thing for me was I could not find a very clear tutorial on how to do 3 different materials. Finding 2 was easy, and even finding 2 where 2 are really similar, like if I had a light brick and a dark brick, where the bricks were fairly interchangeable, and I could kind of toggle between the 2 different variations of brick was easy, but not having 2 different styles of brick or another material altogether like the puddle. I was just working with the sandy rubble and the standard brick for a while, But I wanted to do more, so I decided to get in there and see if I could figure this out, and I watched dozens of videos and eventually came across one that helped break down how to do 3 different interpolations, and then I just applied it to the height, lerp, and other stuff that was taught in some of the other tutorials, and eventually it all came together. So I just kind of want to try to break this down a little bit. I might go through this a little roughly. If anyone watches this and would like some additional clarification, some help with this, that's fine. Feel free to reach out, and I'll do anything I can. I understand most of it. I get most of it, but maybe not all of it. But these 3 things, these 3 sections, the color maps, the normal maps, and the ambient roughness metallic, which of course is 3 different maps, all generated by Substance, they're all pretty much set up the same way. They have the same pieces. They're just plugged into different ports. So basically here, the color maps, I have my 3 different colors. I have the actual brick color in here. I have the sandy gravelly color, and I have my water color. And the water color's got a couple extra pieces, and these pieces, this lerp here, blends the water color in the B port to the brick color in the A port, and then this little sucker right here just helps sort out how they blend together. They're just sort of an even blend. This I can change this value to control. I guess that's a material expression. You just hit like 1 left click to create this little node right here. That's what I did to create this, and I just plug that into the alpha, and that helps with the balance. I can change that value over here, but it's pretty fine at 0.05. So that blends these together into the map that becomes the puddle, and then these are just what they are. So these are plugged into this height lerp expression, and it's simple, but it's also complicated. My main channel, my default channel, is the brick. The brick is the one that I want picked first. And I don't know how or why Unreal picks this stuff, but it seems to be that Unreal is always pulling from the B channel first. And the way these basically work is that this first height lerp is trying to decide between the puddle material and the brick. And then the second one is between the previous height lerp and the gravel. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words a lot. And the gravel. And then the third one is between that height lerp and the brick again. So it kind of circles in itself. It starts with the brick and it ends with the brick. But the height lerps all kind of talk to each other. And that way they can override each other so that you can choose through different materials to paint with. Transition phase is the vertex color that's assigned to it. And for this, for these, I believe that's red. I have red for this. It ends up not mattering because that's not the type of vertex painting that I do, but I went ahead and set it up, and it should still work, but I kept running into issues, and I'm not super interested in figuring that out because I do have something that works. So transition phase for all of them is this red channel on this vertex color node, which just sits over here out of the way and plugs into them. And in case you're not aware, the reason I'm doing height lerp instead of a standard lerp, linear interpolation, is because the height one uses a height map. And the height map basically allows me to fill in the cracks of my paintable area, which I can kind of show. Sometimes it's a little funky, but like as I begin to paint in these areas, see, it begins to kind of seek out those cracks first and fill them in before hitting the main parts of the brick. And that is the effect that I wanted. And it does the same thing with the gravelly map as well. It'll begin to fill the cracks before overcoming the top. And that's awesome. That is so cool for something like this. Not always necessary. It's not always what you need, but it's what I need right now. So that's what I'm doing. Okay, so getting back over here. So height lerp is good for that. So you have your 2 different channels, which are just sort of associating these values together. And that's the same for the standard linear interpolation that you might use for vertex painting as well. It's almost exactly the same. It's A, B, and alpha, essentially. You can see the standard lerp right here that's used to help create the puddle. It's the same thing. But then there's height texture, and that's the texture map for the height map. That's over here. That's hiding over here. And this sucker is plugged into everything. Every single one of these height lerps has that guiding it. It's playing a role in all of them. Because I want it to work for the puddle, and I want it to work for the brick, and I want it to work for the gravel as well. I want it to work for all of it. So that's pretty simple. There's a 2D parameter here, or param 2D, and it's just got this little 1 minus x thing attached to it, because basically a height map sort of automatically works backwards. It would start from the top and work down, and that's not what I need. So I have to invert it, and you can invert it by plugging it into this 1 minus x, which I've just labeled inversion. So that plugs into the height texture node on all of these suckers, on all of them. And contrast helps with the balance of the height map. And I have this little other parameter that I labeled blend contrast, and I just set that to 0.33, which is also the default value that it comes in with, and that works fine. You don't have to use it, but it makes the balance of painting that in a little bit better. And so that's plugged into the contrast node of all of these suckers. And then, of course, the results go into their respective places, eventually ending up in base color. So that's pretty much it. The color maps all come out of here as RGB. Nothing else is plugged into them. And that's in part because they don't, they do tile, but the tiles that they're put on are square in shape. So they tile with the other tiles just fine. If you were doing a tileable texture that had to that had to sit over a larger surface, you could use a texture coordinate node to plug into UVs to help tile that better, to make it much finer, more detailed. It'll still work. In fact, I had that before because my floor was one giant piece, but I needed more geometry, and eventually it was starting to impact performance. So I went back to tiles, and that seems to be working pretty well. Okay, so normal map's the exact same gosh darn thing. There's the normal value that I chose for my water. That's fairly arbitrary. I tried to go for a value that would raise it a little bit, but that's kind of hard to just sort of pick. So I just picked a color value that was similar to one that was on the higher parts of the bricks on another map. But there's for the puddle, for the gravel, and for the bricks. And this process is almost 1-to-1, exactly the same as it needs to be here. The only difference is that I don't have to do anything special for the normal. I don't have to blend it with anything because I don't want the normal of the brick to come through the puddle, because if it did, then the puddle would have the shape of the brick, but it's water, it's flat on its surface, so that's not really necessary. Unless it's in motion, which is not in motion, so it doesn't matter. So that's just kind of plugged in directly, but it's the same thing. And you want to keep them in the same order. The same order you have these here, it needs to be here. With the brick on the bottom, ending and starting with the brick. That's important. Otherwise, if you do these out of order, then when you're painting with one texture, it's going to have different values. They're going to get all mixed up, and you're going to have like the height map or the normal map from one and the color map from another and so on, and it's just going to look like garbage. So same order, same thing, same things plugged in, the same. This time for vertex color, I went with green, and I just sort of went down the line. And the height texture is the same, contrast is the same. They go 1, 2, and 3 into normal. The final one's a little different. This is an ambient roughness metallic map, which is the standard generated right out of Substance. The way Substance basically handles it is the red channel is your ambient occlusion, the green channel is your roughness, and your blue map is your metallic. And none of my materials have any metallic properties in this, so it doesn't really matter all that much. But you can, it's the same thing. I made my own little color value here for it. And all I did in this, we actually go into the color picker, was I gave it a smidge of green, because no green means roughness is all the way down. I didn't give it any blue because I don't want it to have any metallic properties, and I didn't give it any red because I don't want it to have any ambient occlusion values, and it wouldn't make sense to give ambient values to the entire thing. That would look stupid. So I mean, you could mess with that if you wanted to, but I just wanted to curb that roughness slightly, and that's the only thing that matters. That way it's still super duper shiny, as water would be, and the higher that value is, the duller the water looks, the less reflective it is, and that's not going to work for me. So it's plugged in the exact same way, this into this with the brick, and then this and this, and these just go in full RGB. You just bring the whole thing, the whole value into these things. but it has to be split up. When you're doing regular materials, as you may already know, you would split like the R into one value and the G into another and the B into another. But here where we're sorting all this stuff out, you just take the full RGB, sort it all out together. And when you get to the end, you use this breakout float 3 components node and bring that final value into it. And there is where we separate the 3. That's where you do it. You do it here. And then you separate them into ambient metallic roughness or roughness metallic. And that's pretty much it. Those are all of the parts together, and those give me this effect. And it took a while to figure this out. I kept kind of jumping around. I kept having problems where I tried to build something in to tile it better, and that might break something, or I would bring in additional materials, or I would accidentally change a material, and it would really mess with it. I will show you how to paint it just to be clear, but this works. This currently is working, so this is what I am using, and I group them together. Grouping stuff together is easy. You just select stuff and then right click on one of them and choose Create Comment from Selection. That'll box it in, and then you can name the box, and you can, if you move the box, it moves everything in the box. It's great. Very, very nice. So save it, apply it, whatever. Come back over here. Vertex painting, you can select your surface or multiple surfaces. You can select multiple surfaces together. I've selected all my floor tile pieces that are in here, which are in folders, and switch to the brush. And there's colors, weights, and textures. And colors is kind of the default vertex painting method. It works for a lot of things. We went over here to these other parts. I selected this piece here. These are just 2 maps, so I have it in full RGB. So if I paint with one, it's got one thing. Paint with the other, got the other. Real easy going that. But the floor tiles are not quite so nice. They are not as good to me because they are more complicated. So for that, I'm not using colors, I'm using weights. Theoretically, in colors, it should still work. You should be able to paint red to whatever was corresponding in red, which was color map, and then green. But the problem, think of it like that too. The problem is then I just realized why that doesn't work. Is that why that doesn't work? Good Lord, it's way too much to think about. I'm not going to paint all of the color maps together. That doesn't, it's not worth thinking about. I don't care. I'm doing this other way. This other way works. So we're switching to weights instead, and you blend between the weight values of the 3. You don't want to change the color view mode because it'll come out looking like this, and that stinks. So we're going to turn that to off. But the texture weight, you are going to change it to RGB to 3 textures. And we did assign stuff RGB. And you can see that there's paint texture, texture 1. You basically pick 2, your paint texture and your erase texture. So right now, texture 1 is my paint texture, and texture 1 is the gravel. So my erase texture is texture 3. So when I hold shift and click to erase, it brings me back to the brick. Usually you pretty much just always want texture, whatever your base material is, your texture 3 to be that. So it's always there, always erasing stuff. And then my texture 2 is of course the puddle. I can bring that in and paint that, erase it as needed. I can kind of tippy tap through some parts of it to kind of get it bleeding into some of the cracks or some kind of cool effects in there. You can change the size of your brush in vertex painting if you don't know by hitting the open and close brackets, next to P on your keyboard. Those make it bigger and smaller. I don't know why that's the default. Why not plus and minus? They're right above them, but whatever. Unreal's got its reasons. And I can just do whatever I need to. And honestly, it's very powerful, and it ends up looking pretty good. You can see when I get in real close, you can see that like the reflectiveness over the surface. I can change the watercolor by blending my color differently, but most of that's coming from the lights in the scene, which they totally need to be rebuilt. But it doesn't have the normal values of the bricks, but the bricks, they're still there. I was gonna play. I had a bump offset that was in here, creating a pretty cool effect on the bricks, but it led to some other problems with the vertex painting. That's maybe better left to other areas. There's also parallax mapping that you can do to make your surfaces stand off more. It's one of those things where it can help, but at a certain point when you have all these kind of interconnected systems together, stuff starts breaking and it becomes harder and harder to figure out what's wrong. So work smarter, not harder, I guess. Take the approach that works best for you, but overall this effect looks pretty good for the floor. I still may change the floor tiles. And the cool thing is at any point, if I decide I want different tiles or different shapes or whatever, I just have to bring in a different height map and swap these color maps with other maps or update them in the Unreal Engine. Why'd I have to get the hiccups now? And they'll just automatically update and it's all done. Great. So I hope that was some amount of help to somebody. I'm still new to this too. I don't know everything that I'm doing yet, but I'm having fun with it. And I hope you are too. And I guess I'll talk to you later. See ya. Goodbye.